living room, coming to you live from Memphis, Tennessee. This is our first living room coming from Memphis, and we are so, so happy to be here. Thank all of you for being in the room and those of you signing in online. We're excited about tonight for a multitude of reasons, but one, to talk about lung cancer care in the community setting and why it's so important that we work to improve standards there, given that 80+% of patients are seen in this type of environment. So I've got an expert panel here to talk about some of the things we're doing, to talk about what good looks like. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a minute. Normally, when we start our living room at home, for those of you who may or may not sign in to watch, we do it around the room. It is not mandatory, but we know that everyone in the room, whether it's a patient, a caregiver, a friend, someone from industry, is here because lung cancer matters to them for one reason or another. So we really like to be able to hear from you to talk about why you're here, why it's important to you to come to meetings like this and learn more about the landscape of lung cancer, where we are and where we're going. So I'm going to ask Kim Parham, who works with us at the Addario. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, my bad, and I don't do this regularly, mostly because I forget that I'm on camera and I'm at home with a bunch of people in the room who know who I am. So for those of you who may not know who I am, my name is Danielle Hicks, and I'm the Associate Executive Director overseeing patient programs and services at the Bonnie J. Addario Lung Cancer Foundation. So the living room is one of my babies and one of my very most favorite things about my job. So that's who I am. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kim. And for those of you who would like to introduce yourselves, please do so.
Hello, I'm Kim Parham, and I'm the cancer support. I work with the cancer patients as a navigator, and I'm also the clinical program director. I'm not the director anymore. I was that at St. Thomas Health in Nashville. My goodness. Patient navigation and clinical program development manager is
Correct.
what I do
so
now.
Long.
So thank you all for coming, and welcome to Tennessee, everybody. So I'm going to pass the mic, and please just share your name if you would like, and if not, that's fine.
I'm Greg Hollenbeck, husband of Gina Hollenbeck, who's on the panel here tonight, and I'm just here to support her.
My name's Angela Fulford. I'm a nurse navigator with Dr. O.
My name's Christy Rourke, and I'm nurse navigator as well in the Thoracic Multidisciplinary Clinic at Baptist.
I'm Anna Plaza. I'm the Eastern Regional Events Manager for the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation.
Good evening. I'm Linda Reddick, and I'm with Seas to Life, a nonprofit organization that deals with lung and breast cancer.
Hello, I'm Denise Bradford. I'm with TC2 and also with a breast cancer foundation called STARS.
Good evening. I'm Mia Earl, owner of Abundant Life Wellness Solutions, and as a wellness and natural health practitioner, I work with a lot of people in the community with various health issues, and I also have an uncle that was close to me that passed with lung cancer a little over a year ago, so that's dear to me as well.
Good evening, Robin Hayes. I'm with Genentech. I work with the biomarker testing team. I help navigate molecular testing in the lung space.
Hey, I'm Erin Funderburg. I'm also with Genentech. I have my stepfather passed away from lung cancer a couple of years ago as well, so it's also something that's really near and dear to my heart as well. So I'm glad we're talking about it tonight.
My name's Blair Morgan. I'm with Genentech as well, and I'm anxious to kind of learn about what the newest updates are inside the lung cancer environment and what patients can do to take more ownership kind of their treatment choices going forward. I also lost a father to lung cancer, so it's indeed important to me as well.
I'm Brady Hamilton with Biodesics. We're a diagnostics company out of Boulder. Both of my paternal grandparents died of lung cancer when I was a child, so it is very something dear to me as well.
Hi, I'm Robert Edwards with Bristol Myers Squibb. Same, I had two grandparents die from lung cancer, so it's something near and dear to me as well.
I'm Jeff Harrington, also from Bristol-Myers Squibb, and well, we're fighting for patients every day in the lung cancer space. So it's something that's very personal. Have a father that's dealing with cancer in another space. So yeah, it's very important.
My name's John Hathorn. I'm with Bristol-Myers Squibb as well, and agree with my teammates over here, but also want to get a chance to see Dr. O and hear what he has to say tonight.
Good evening. My name is Tony Ill, and I'm the sister of a cancer survivor, patient of Dr. O's.
And I am that patient of Dr. O's. And my name is Mark Ill, the brother of Tony, and I am a patient of Dr. O's.
Hi, I'm Jackie Osborne. I am the caregiver to my husband who has lung cancer, and he's a patient of Dr. O's, and he's doing wonderful.
Good evening. I'm Orion Osborne. I am a cancer survivor. Thank God to Dr. O. Thank you, man.
6 years.
Pardon me? 6 years. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's everybody.
Michelle, is there anybody online who wants to say hello or give a shout out right now? Okay. Just so everybody knows, again, those online and those of you in the room, how this works. As we're having the conversation, we really want to encourage you to ask questions throughout to keep it really interactive and keep the conversation going. But also we want to hear from you. You know, what are your thoughts about what we're talking about? You know, thoughts, opinions, comments, any of it. So please, please, please feel free. If you just raise up your hand, Kim's going to be kind of watching the room, and she'll bring you a mic as needed. And for those of you online, there is the chat feature, and Michelle Zay is here in the room moderating. So if you have a question, she will raise her hand on your behalf. So before we move into the topic, this is something new I've started to do at the living room because I feel like panelists can introduce themselves way better than I can reading a bio from a piece of paper. And what I'd like to do is have everybody say who they are, what they do, and why lung cancer is important to you. So Dr. O, do you want to start?
So I'm Ray Osarogiagbon. I'm the infamous Dr. O. I am a thoracic oncologist very interested in lung cancer. And I'm a foot soldier in Gina's army, as you can see from my shirt.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Leah Fine. I'm the director of the Centers of Excellence program at the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation. So I lead a program around building expert multidisciplinary teams and hospitals and standard of care all across the country through community hospitals. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about that tonight.
I'm Gina Hollenbeck. I'm a lung cancer survivor and warrior and a patient of Dr. O's.
Thank you, you guys. And I thought what we do tonight is ask Gina to tell her story. I think it's important to, before we jump into you know, lung cancer care in the community hospital setting, that we hear a story and really kind of wrap our heads around what the experience of one patient looks like. So Gina, will you please be so kind as to tell us your story?
I'd love to tell my story. So in 2015, I was an exercise enthusiast, a marathon runner, a nurse, a tennis player. I was really active. And I started coughing. And so I went to my OBGYN and I asked him, like, hey, I'm coughing. And it was around June or July at that point when I started coughing. And he's like, it's seasonal allergies, but let's just get a chest x-ray to be sure. So we did. And the chest x-ray said it was clear. And I kept coughing. And I was a nurse. And I just knew something was wrong. I just had a feeling that something was wrong. And I coughed so hard that I started getting little dots on the bottoms of my legs, called petechiae, and I knew then for sure something is wrong. But I ran a 5K, And 2 weeks later, I felt so bad. I called into work and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I just keep coughing. And so I'm just going to ask my friend if he'll do a chest x-ray. So my friend worked at a diagnostic imaging center, and she was like, well, do you have a doctor's order for it? And I was like, not really, but I'll get one of my doctor friends to write an order. So, if we can just do it, it would be great. And so she got me in, and the radiologist there read it, and he was like, your left lung looks like it's completely collapsed. And I was like, that's not even possible. I just ran a 5K. My time wasn't very good, but like I just did that 2 weeks ago, so there's no way that my lung could be collapsed. And he's like, no, you need to see a pulmonologist now. And that was a Friday afternoon, so I think it was like around noon. And so I started calling around to pulmonologist offices, and it was going to take about 2 months to get in. And I read them my chest x-ray report, and I was like, I think this needs to be seen a little quicker. Are you sure you can't get me in before 2 months? And they were like, no. And so I just took it to the emergency room. So I walked into the emergency room for exactly what they tell you not to walk in for, a cough. And I looked perfectly normal, other than I had little dots on my legs and I was coughing. And so they did a CT scan, and the ER doctor said, you need to get this checked out. I don't know what it is, but you definitely need to get this checked out. I have a pulmonologist friend and he can see you tomorrow. And that doctor was actually sick, so I got to see another pulmonologist, Dr. Ellis, and he was very concerned when he saw me, and he said, you know, you don't really fit any of the criteria for pneumonia, so I don't think it's pneumonia, and you don't really fit the criteria for histoplasmosis, so those are 2 options that we thought it was. And so I really feel like I need to do a biopsy. And I was losing weight, which was, even though I was an exercise enthusiast, I never lost weight. And the nurse in me was like, do you think this is cancer? And I asked him pretty clearly, I was like, come on, I'm really pretty sick, and I'm having a hard time even completing sentences now. Not only am I coughing, but I can't read a story to my kids, and I can't sing, and every time I laugh, I cough. And he said, you know, you're 37 years old, and you know, we don't know, but let's just look and see what it is, and you know, we're not going to make any diagnoses before we get the biopsy. So he did an EBUS, so which is an ultrasound guided biopsy of my lung, and about a week later we got the results, and he told me that it was adenocarcinoma. And I was like, and he said it's positive for tumor cells. And I was like, tumor cells, does that mean cancer? And he's like, yeah, Gina, that means cancer. And I was shocked and sad and scared, and all my friends had been kind of waiting to know what was going on with me, because everybody knew that I was getting sick and I was worried. And so we found out that it was adenocarcinoma, and he said, I know exactly what to do. I have a really good friend, Dr. Osarogiagbon, and I want you to go see him. And the next thing I know, I think Christy or Laura called me, and they said they could get me in the next day, which was a Wednesday. And on that Wednesday, well, actually, between then and Tuesday and Wednesday, my husband and I got online and we started researching like crazy. And we tried to figure out about lung cancer. And when we looked online, there wasn't a lot of good stuff to say about lung cancer, especially when you were my age, young. It looked like the prognosis was not going to be good. So we were, you know, trying to figure out what to do and who to tell, and we hadn't told our children yet. I had 2 really young boys, and we just weren't really sure. In the meantime, we had this big annual Halloween party, like this big blowout at our house every year. And so we were preparing for this party, and I didn't want to tell anybody that I had cancer, because according to the internet, like I wasn't probably going to see another Halloween. So I just thought, you know what, let's just have the big party. Let's not tell anybody, because I don't want it to be about cancer. So we started just planning this party. And so in the meantime, I go see Dr. O on a Wednesday, and Dr. O took so much time with me to really explain what was going on. And we had heard that I had small cell lung cancer, which is very different than non-small cell. And so Dr. O said, no, it's non-small cell. And we like didn't believe him. And so he even pulled open the chart and he was like, no, you can read right here. It's non-small cell. And I was like, oh, that's much better. That's great. But he spent about 2 hours just explaining all of my chest x-rays, and he explained to me that lung cancer likes your brain. And so if I had the time, could I go down and get an MRI that day? And I said, yes, well, we're going to make the time. And just getting all of that information, like I can go back to that moment, and I remember how difficult that was, just taking all of that in. And as I waited for the MRI, I had the worst headache ever, and I started getting nauseous and sick, and I never had like intellectual information actually make me physically sick. And I laid down there, and they were so nice to me, but they did the MRI, and the night of our big party, Dr. O called on the phone, and we knew that if Dr. O called, that it probably was an emergency, and we probably needed to take the call. So it was probably about 2 hours before our guest arrived, and Dr. O told me that my MRI showed something, that it looked like there was a tumor in my brain. And so we had that information to hold on to with all of our party and our guests, but we wound up having a wonderful party, and everybody was really nice, and it was great. Everybody had a really good time, but then we had to make some decisions. And Dr. O stood by us the entire way and just helped us. His team, Laura and Christy, were so good to me, just answering any questions that I had. And it turned out that right before Halloween, I started telling people that I had cancer. And that was one of the hardest times for me, telling people that I had cancer, because their reactions were so, they were devastated. And especially for the caregivers who were healthcare providers, stage 4 lung cancer doesn't have a really good prognosis. And here I was, a complete picture of health. I exercised. I had never smoked in my life. And I have lung cancer. And I thought, this is some kind of crazy joke. And anyway, my husband and I did a lot of research, and we went and had another appointment with Dr. O, and we said, we looked on the internet, and it looks like MD Anderson is the best, and so for cancer, so that's where we're going. And Dr. and I have worked with a lot of doctors, and I wasn't expecting him to be happy with me, and he said, yes, Gina, go and get as much information as you can. Use every resource you can, and let's fight this. And I loved that attitude to say, yes, you need to do what you need to do and get as much information as you can. So I did. I went to MD Anderson, and they didn't have a whole lot of hope for my situation, especially after they knew that it was stage 4 lung cancer. But while we were there, Dr. O was wise enough to send away my tissue for genomic testing. And while I was in Houston, Laura called me with the results of my genomic testing, and it showed that I was ALK positive. And I already knew it. It was really funny because I had been in MD Anderson's library the whole time I was there. That's all I did. I think that was my coping mechanism, as I just started researching. And I told my husband, okay, you're going to take this half of the library, and you're going to look through these research articles, and I'm going to look through these. And so when Laura called me, I was like, is it ALK? Because I think I totally fit that. And she's like, yes, it is ALK. And so it was funny looking back. But I can think of some of the hard times while we were in MD Anderson. At one point, we were planning my funeral, and because that's what statistically it said would happen. So I was planning my funeral, and then I decided, you know what, I'm not going to die. Nope, I don't really want to do this. I'm not going to plan my funeral, and I don't want to die. So we're just going to fight. And I got really excited once I found out I had ALK, and I kind of told MD Anderson, I think I really have the best doctors right there in Memphis, and I think that's where I need to go, and that's where I need to be treated, and I was right. So Dr. O quickly got me on a TKI, which is a targeted therapy for my genomic alteration called ALK. And we had a few side effects, but really 6 weeks after getting on my targeted therapy, we did another PET scan, and it showed that there was no cancer anywhere. And 2 weeks after I started the pill that I was on, I could start breathing, I could talk, I was normal, I could read my kids' stories. stories. I could sing, which I don't do very well, but I like to do it. So I could sing again, and I was so excited. I was like, this is so positive. And my husband started Gina's Army on Facebook, a Facebook page of just prayer warriors and people who are going through the journey with me and praying for me and just supporting me and loving on me. And all of that support was so instrumental. And so, I mean, it just made me feel like I can do this. I can defeat the odds, and I can do what statistics say that I can. And so anyway, I got on target therapy. My PET scan was clear, and we had to do brain surgery. So I had a craniotomy to remove the brain tumor. And then I had radiation to my brain, which is called CyberKnife. And I went through a lot in a few months. And because the cancer was gone, a thoracic surgeon, Dr. Robbins, agreed to remove my left upper lobe where the cancer started. And so I had lung surgery, the lobectomy, to remove my left upper lobe. And I've been on my TKI. We've had to change a couple times, so I'm actually on my third targeted therapy for cancer, and I'm doing really great. So I just had an MRI a week or so ago, and it was all good.
That's great. So I think one of the things you guys will find out, thank you, Gina, for sharing that, as we have this conversation today, is that lung cancer is a very complex disease. And in the community setting, particularly one that doesn't have the benefit of a larger cancer center like Baptist, where Dr. O is, but particularly in the more rural settings, the doctors, they're treating whatever walks in the door, right? So, you know, between solid tumor and blood cancers, there's 100+ different types of cancers. So, you know, the expectation that any one human being can know everything there is to know about all of that, I think is unrealistic. So at the foundation, one of the things we, you know, we're hoping to be able to do with the COE program, and you'll hear about it, is to help facilitate that knowledge, right, through the program and what we're doing, and through the physicians who are able to spend the time working specifically in this space, and how they may be able to help other doctors be able to gain the knowledge that they need in order to treat the lung cancer patients. So with that, we're going to jump into a little bit of what is the Center of Excellence program. What does it look like, and why was it developed, although I kind of gave away a little bit of that.
All right. Well, thank you, Gina, for your amazing story, and it just validates everything that, you know, we believe in when we think about what a Center of Excellence can do for patients. The Centers of Excellence program was started because 80% of cancer patients actually receive care in their own community setting. They often don't have access, perhaps like what you had, where, you know, to go to an MD Anderson or Dana-Farber or a leading academic center. And so most people really do rely on their very own, if you will, community neighborhood hospital. And, you know, we believe because of that high demand that there should be a standard of care and consistency of care across all community hospitals, and that's really what the COE program really strives for. So at the core or the heart of the Center of Excellence program is this notion of a multidisciplinary team, which sounds a lot like you know, what Gina encountered with Dr. O and his team, is that, you know, cancer is sufficiently complex that it doesn't really, you can't have just one person treating and knowing it all. You need really a, you know, a group of experts to be able to quickly diagnose and triage the situation and help to develop a treatment plan that involves a lot of different steps. In Gina's case and in many patients' cases, you know, you have to look a little bit deeper. You do the histology and understand what type of cancer it is, but then you have to look deeper beyond that, and that's where a lot of the molecular testing comes in. And so all of our centers of excellence have standardized practices around molecular testing to look for all of those, you know, common and not so common biomarkers, and in many cases to send that biomarker or that tissue test out to get biomarker testing done through something called next generation sequencing, which looks at a lot of different biomarkers simultaneously. So we look across, you know, our multidisciplinary teams, and we look for those best practices. And so the Centers of Excellence program identifies those hospitals that are delivering the highest quality of care from very early stage diagnosis. So all of our programs have low-dose CT screening programs to capture early stage. They also have the lung nodule clinics, which help to identify, if you will, incidental findings and sufficiently triage those for notice or alert. And then all the way up through late stage diagnosis, so that, you know, the vast majority of patients are reviewed by a tumor board or a multidisciplinary team and are evaluated for molecular testing. They're often evaluated for clinical trials. And so we're trying to standardize those best practices across an entire network of community hospitals.
Thanks, Leah. So with that, and we'll dig a little deeper into how we're doing that in a second, but I want Dr. O to talk a little bit about what implementing these standards look like in the community setting, beginning with screening and early detection and running through the...
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. If you walked out on the street and said lung cancer, what's the first impression you get in people's mind? It's death, I think. You know, in fact, the word cancer already packs a punch. You add lung before you say cancer, and everybody's ready to just flee. And the statistics bear that out. So if you look at all the cancers that we diagnose in the United States every year, it's about 15% of them that are lung cancer. But if you look at the causes of death, it rises suddenly to 26%. So it's a big deal. We lose more Americans every year to lung cancer than to breast cancer, colon cancer, rectal cancer, and throw in pancreas cancer if you want, you know. So yes, it's a very well-earned notoriety. But as complex as it is, there are now certain things that we can talk about, the pathway forward. If you look at the population, if you just look at the population out there in the United States or across the world and say, okay, what is our biggest opportunity to make a difference? There's this broad-based pyramid, okay? At the base of it is prevention, of course, right? Everybody knows that. So how can you prevent lung cancer? Because the majority of people who get lung cancer are people who at one time in the past, unlike Gina's case, smoked. Preventing people from smoking and getting those who have already smoked to quit is a huge opportunity we have. But when you get past that, the really exciting part of it is that in the last 10 years or so, we now know that a certain type of CT scan, a low-dose CT scan, which is not much more than what you get when you do a chest X-ray, actually saves lives. If you get people who are at risk for lung cancer because of how old they are and how much they've smoked in the past, to do that test. So one of the opportunities we have is to increase the percentage of people who, you know, there are about 8 million Americans out there who would qualify for screening, and it's only about 3% of them who have ever had a screening test. 3%. That's 3. So if you could push that up closer to 100%, you have this huge opportunity. The other part of it is, one of the things we know in our world today in healthcare is you walk into an emergency room with a headache, you get an x-ray of some sort. You cut your toenail, you get an x-ray of some sort. So one of the things that we have noticed is when you sit in an environment where you can actually monitor patients, you find all these people with lung cancer who, if you go back in time, you can actually find an old x-ray that in hindsight showed a spot that might have been dealt with if people had just recognized. But so why don't we deal with it? We don't, because, you know, the reason why you got that x-ray in the first place was you were having a heart attack, okay? And that was the priority at the time. You came in with, you know, flu-type symptoms. There was pneumonia, okay? Obviously had to be dealt with. And in the euphoria of getting over the heart attack, surviving the stroke, surviving the car accident that made that x-ray to be done, we forget that there was something in that lung. Then you go further up that pyramid, okay? And there is this opportunity we also have where people who are diagnosed with lung cancer, however the diagnosis was made, if we could just deliver to them the best care that we already know exists, is available, works, a high percentage of the time, we would save a whole lot of lives. And on to the tip of the pyramid, where you now get the majority of patients who we diagnose right now, because so few people take part in screening, are unfortunately people diagnosed at stage 4. So almost half of our patients are at stage 4. And we do have to confess in 2018 that the majority of patients with stage 4 disease, we failed to cure their cancer. There are exceptions, but the problem is we find way too many people at stage 4 and at a point where it's mighty tough. So the idea then is there is a lot of knowledge already existing out there that we don't apply. There are lots of opportunities to identify or prevent, identify early, treat correctly, and offer cutting-edge treatment that's on the street, on the shelf, readily available. But the knowledge is moving so fast. Every 6 months there's a new gene mutation identified that has a target that works against it. Many new things are coming. As Danielle said, putting all that together in one human head, one human brain is impossible. So the idea then that you have to get past, I hope my doctor is a good guy and has the knowledge he needs to, somebody better put that infrastructure down to make sure that I get that care I need, when I need it, how I need it, is the challenge that we have. And it's wonderful to see, you know, patient-centered organizations, advocacy organizations like the Bonnie J. Adario Lung Cancer Foundation, stepping forward saying, okay, we love the doctors, we know they're mighty smart people, wonderful people, and so on and so forth, but we also know that they're human. And to the degree that they remain so, we need to create some structure around them to help them to be more successful than they've proven to be in the past. I think that's a basic concept.
I think you're absolutely right, and I want to, before we move on to what sort of some of the more detailed information about what happens after the screening and you know, whether it's an incidental finding or through an ER or something like that. You said something, and you guys will see me taking notes as everybody's talking because questions will pop into my mind and I don't want to interrupt, but about treating correctly. And in this screening and even this early detection space, a number of recurrence even in that space for stage 1 and 2 patients is still really high. And I think that points back to why it's so important. And typically, and I'll let you kind of explain the reasoning behind that, but why it's so important that the patients themselves become knowledgeable about this type of information so that they can ensure and advocate for their own selves, right? So why is the incidence rate still so high in this early stage population?
Yeah. So the traditional belief we had was, well, you know, it's lung cancer. What do you expect? You know, it's a bad cancer. But it turns out there's way more to it than that. One of the problems that we have is we often fail as health delivery people to deliver the highest quality all the time. So for example, we have done a lot of work looking at the people at the very best end of lung cancer, those who were found early enough where we have a belief that we ought to be able to cure it. So every patient who comes in with a spot in their lung that turns out to be cancer and we don't find it anywhere else, we at that point in time believe that we can make this cancer go away and never come back. But if you had 100 such patients in the room today, 2018, and we all go away, come back, it's 2023, 5 years from now, and you ask the question, how many of that group of 100 would still be alive? It's actually about 50 to 60, okay? And if you took everybody who gets surgery for lung cancer in America every year, so there are about 85,000 individuals in the United States who will have lung cancer surgery this year. If you took all of them, it's less than half of them who would be alive. Why is that? Unfortunately, a big part of the reason is the way the surgery gets done is not right. The critical information we have to be able to know if this person's risk is truly as low as we thought, or if there's other stuff that we need to do to push it down to where it needs to be, is usually missing. And that is whether the cancer has spread to the lymph nodes that drain that lung. Unfortunately, the majority of the time when patients have surgery for lung cancer in the United States, and indeed worldwide, actually the United States is even way better than most parts of the world, but even here in the United States, that critical piece of information is often missing or is not collected well enough for us to be able to tell. So we wind up assuming people are going to be fine, not knowing that they're not, because we missed the opportunity to get the information that would have given us that knowledge that we could then have acted upon.
I think part of the challenge there is when we talk about a specialist, and we're going to get into a little bit about the multidisciplinary team, which Leah touched on a little bit, and who all those team members are and what that looks like. The thoracic surgeon is a really big part of that in this particularly in the screening space. And as an average patient or just lay person, patients don't know that there's a difference between a cardiothoracic surgeon and a true thoracic surgeon, right? And what that difference is and why it's important. That doesn't mean that there aren't cardiothoracic guys that can still do great surgery. It just means that it's information that patients need to have. So moving forward from screening a little bit, let's talk about diagnostics. What happens after a lung cancer is found? Yeah,
so lung cancer is complex, but you can actually force it to be simple. If you just go back and say, okay, what is the logic behind this? It always starts at the same point from the perspective of healthcare providers and the patients dealing with lung cancer. It always starts out at one point, when somebody has an X-ray that shows a spot in the lung, okay? From that point on, it goes through certain sequences of steps. There's a spot in the lung. The first question is, what is it? Is it cancer or is it something else? That requires a biopsy. That biopsy tells you cancer, yes, no, and if yes, what type of cancer it is. It should anyway tell you that, okay? The moment you hear it's cancer, the next question is, well, how much cancer do we have? The technical term we use for that is the stage. How widespread is it? How big is the tumor? Where else has it been able to get to? So to figure that out, there are two steps that we typically have to take. One is a picture that can give you an idea of where it might be. So you hear about a CAT scan of the chest, a PET CT scan, sometimes an MRI of the brain. And then there's also when you've taken that picture and you've either found something that looks suspicious, or even when you haven't found and you think, this may be early, maybe we can really deal with this with surgery or some other means to make it go and never come back. There is a need to get what we call a staging biopsy, which is to take a piece of the places where this cancer might be wanting to get to find out whether it's there or not. The reason why that's important is that where the cancer has been able to get to now tells you, A, how bad is this likely to be? How tough an hombre is this thing going to be? And how tough do you have to be in return against it to try to corral it, okay? So first, that shot, an X-ray that shows a spot, then a biopsy, then a staging radiologic test, some additional X-rays, then a staging biopsy. and then the selection of treatment. And treatment can go in several directions. It could be surgery if we think this is early and we can do something to take it all out. It could be radiation if it's early but the patient can't handle surgery, or if we think it's gone past the point where surgery by itself would be able to do this. It could be chemotherapy if it's truly far advanced, or we think that we can't have surgery but we might be able to cure it, so we have to combine chemotherapy with radiation, or maybe combine all three things together. Okay? So I said chemotherapy, but I'm using that old term which is not used that way anymore, because when I say chemotherapy, we're saying we think the cancer is spreading, okay? And how does it spread? Oftentimes through the blood and so on. We need to give you something that will go ride the same bloodstream and chase after it wherever in the body it's trying to get to. So conventionally, we've used chemotherapy. But in today's world, we now have all these exciting new drugs that are super effective. You just heard Gina talk about a pill that she's taken that has made her cancer melt away. And there are many different types of pills like that for many different types of lung cancer like that. And then, of course, there's immunotherapy, which is the new kid on the block that we're all incredibly excited about. Getting your immune system to rise up and fight against your cancer that had found a way to sneak around without the immune system's awareness.
So when we talk about this, because I know patients ask all the time, and where they get very concerned if they don't have a mutation or a fusion or whatever it might be that has a direct target, they hear the words chemotherapy and they automatically think that's it, right? But chemotherapy in and of itself is a targeted therapy. It's just not targeting a driver. Can you explain a little bit about what driver mutations are?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have found is that lung cancer is not lung cancer, is not lung cancer, is not lung cancer. No two lung cancers are the same. And the differences we're now beginning to be able to clearly identify by looking at the biology, the genetics, and the proteins that the cancer expresses. So there are now certain specific types of gene changes that allow the cancer to be a cancer that you can actually take. It's almost like you have a lock, and you can take a key that fits perfectly into that lock, and when you fit it in and turn it, the door opens and you get rid of the cancer. Okay? Those targeted agents are highly effective. They have a common behavior. They're super, super effective. The side effect profiles tend to be much more favorable, which is why everybody loves them. And of course, most of them are pills. So the difference between going home and taking a pill once or twice a day versus going every 2 weeks, 3 weeks to my clinic to get an IV for several hours and then go home is, a quality of life issue. Anybody given the choice between the two clearly understands which one they would prefer. So there is that. But not everybody has one that we can identify yet today. So if you look at it in the past 10, 15 years, if you look at it as a pizza, the slices of the pizza that have the specific gene mutation for which we can actually use a pill or some targeted agent continues to get bigger and bigger. But it's still about 30% of the whole pizza. Unfortunately, the most common mutation that we find that by itself is almost 30% is something called the KRAS gene mutation. And although it is a gene mutation, we're still not smart enough yet to find the key that opens that particular lock. Okay? A lot of research going on right now trying to find. We've got a few candidate drugs that we're all excited about, but still haven't really been there. So then you have the rest of the pizza, which turns out to be about 30, 40% of the whole pie. For those patients, we don't have a specific gene mutation. And for those patients, typically, we would look at using other drugs that have proven to be effective in killing the cancers, oftentimes what people call chemotherapy. But the other part of it is, as our knowledge continues to expand, and we now understand about these proteins and the immune system, some of these cancers we're actually able to use immunotherapy, drugs that are designed to help your immune system wake up, preferentially, instead of chemotherapy for patients as well. So there is a range. The nice thing is, unlike 20 years ago where we just had a small few drugs and the moment they failed, we were done. Now, instead of a game of checkers, we're having to play a game of chess with lung cancer. Because, you know, we make a move, it makes a counter move, and then we make our next move, and we try to think ahead, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead, knowing that the cancer can make a move and we want to keep ourselves ready.
On that, sort of to bring that out even a little bit further, at what point does rebiopsying play a role in this when you're talking about the cancer moving?
Oh, it's huge. You know, we're talking about cancers that are dynamic. They don't stay the same all the time. The reason why you start out with a cancer that responds to a drug, and then suddenly after a while, for whatever reason, it stops working, or you pop up new areas, is the cancer moves. It changes its genetic makeup. And you can't guess, because there are many different directions it can make a move. So what do? You have to take a piece of it, a snapshot at that point in time, and then see exactly, okay, what move has this cancer made, and which piece am I going to play in to counter that move. That's why repeat biopsies have become more and more important for us. And it's very important for patients to hear this, because a lot of doctors say, oh, patients don't consent to it, patients will agree. That is not true. Every time we have spoken to a patient about the need for a repeat biopsy and taking a little bit of time to explain to them why that could be beneficial for them, I do not remember off the top of my head a single individual saying no.
And I think there's been some huge advancements in the biopsy space as well, which is part of the Center of Excellence program. And Gina, you mentioned EBUS, and there's navigational bronchoscopy, and the risks are still there, obviously, but they're less, and it's easier on the patient, and all of that kind of stuff. So those are sort of just another thing. So we talked a little bit about immunotherapy, and I think we had some of you may or may not know, we had a remote living room on Thursday, this last Thursday in Columbus, Ohio, and we touched on immunotherapy a little bit, talking about, you know, it's a very exciting time, as you said, in this space, because historically we haven't been able to figure out how to turn the immune system on to make it work. And with all the commercials and everything, I know we get patients calling all the time. Again, I must be on immunotherapy because the commercials tell me it's what I need. And so one of the things we talked about is how cancer, when you think about the immune system as a whole, it's supposed to find abnormalities and things that aren't supposed to be there and get rid of them. How does the cancer hide? And one of the things that came up is it's similar to a pregnancy, right? Where for all intents and purposes, a fetus is a foreign object, and your immune system should be able to recognize that and attack it, but cancer hides in a similar way. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the analogy I like to use for my patients to make it easy to understand is anybody who's watched the Harry Potter movies, okay? It's like the cancer invests itself in an invisibility cloak. It's there, but the immune system can't see it. So what these drugs do, more or less, is that they hook onto that invisibility cloak and yank it off. And then suddenly, the immune system soldiers can see, oh, wait a minute, there's this ugly looking guy. He's not part of us. He's trying to get us. We're going to, attack. And that's, in principle, kind of how these drugs work. These immune checkpoint inhibitors, they help the immune system wake up to the fact that there is something that has actually lulled them off to not recognize that there's a problem all around.
So before we move into, we've discussed a little bit the early detection and screening and then the biopsying and upfront diagnostics, finding out what the right drug for that patient is. One of the things we didn't talk about that I know the COE looks at, and we can maybe discuss why this is so important, is the days from diagnosis to treatment. Can you talk about sort of national averages and what that looks like in a center such as yours?
Yeah, so lung cancer traditionally has been tough. We said it's almost half of our patients have found when recognized, diagnosed, when they have advanced disease at stage 4. So the first question I always get from patients is, I had a chest X-ray 3 months ago, well, last year, 2 years ago. How come they didn't find it? One of the things we also know is when you go back and count from when I said that first shot gets fired, where that abnormal X-ray is, and you count forward, the statistics are quite startling. It takes about, the last time we looked at this almost a decade ago, it takes about 6 months from the point of initial abnormal X-ray, that spot, in hindsight, to when the diagnosis is actually made. 6 months. That's about the US average. It's better or worse in various places, but that's kind of where it has been. And you say, well, how's that possible? Okay. Well, it's possible because the vast majority of spots that you will find in somebody's lungs will not be lung cancer. So, for example, if you look at people who go through CT screening, okay, so these are high-risk patients. The reason why they qualify for a CAT scan to screen for lung cancer, which they look healthy, nobody knows they have, is because they are super high risk, okay? It's about 30 to 40% of all patients who take part in screening programs who actually have an abnormal screening test, meaning there's something there that could be lung cancer. If you took that large number of people and asked how many of them turn out to have lung cancer, it's actually 4%. A giant haystack, very few needles. But the needles sure are sharp. We know that, okay? So we've got to find them. So the difficulty is if you went willy-nilly trying to cut out lung cancer from every single person who has a shadow in their lung, what you will wind up doing is you would hurt way more people than you help. So then the challenge becomes, okay, how can we tell the friend from the foe? How can we tell the one that's destined to be a lung cancer from the one that's not? And that's where the issue of, well, you can't trust the single individual to do it right enough of the time comes in. We all need help. You need a program that can collect these people and say, okay, right now there's a spot in your lung, but I don't know what it is, okay? Odds are it's going to be okay, but there's a chance it may not be. So here's what we need to do. We can do a biopsy now. We can watch you and get another X-ray in a period of time, after a period of time. Which one do you want to do? And then agree with you on where your comfort zone is, and then do it. Based on what the doctor feels is the likelihood of having the cancer, the likelihood of hurting you by going after a cancer that may not be a cancer, and your comfort with uncertainty, okay? But the point is something has to be done. It's not enough to say, well, it doesn't look like a cancer, go away. It's, okay, after a certain period of time, we're going to check again. And if the thing does this, that, or the other, at that point, we get a biopsy. Agree? Okay, that's what we do. So we don't get enough of that. What we get a lot of is, well, there was a spot there, and the guy said it was okay, so I just sort of let it go. Or, well, you're 40 years old. You can't have lung cancer. Just, don't worry about it. Well, I think I'm going to make you an appointment to come see me in 3 months. Oops, we dropped the ball somewhere and we didn't, there's a lot of that goes on. So the idea then is it's a complex problem. It's a high volume problem, okay? It's a high risk problem in many different directions. It's a high risk from the cancer itself, but it's also a high risk of hurting innocent people who will never get cancer by doing goofy things on them that they don't need. So what we need is some kind of algorithm and an environment of care that allows us to, monitor people and do the right thing for them. And that's where programs like the COE come in.
So I think this is a good segue into what a multidisciplinary team looks like. We've talked a little bit about, you just mentioned it, something can be missed or a ball was dropped, and why it's important that this team be working together for the patient. So who and what is a multi-D team?
So if you look at lung cancer, there's certain things about it, okay? It's the human chest, okay? The chest, we got what's here in the front? Bone. What's here on the side? Bone, 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 okay? All right. Where are the lungs? They're inside this bony cage, right? What's in the middle here? It's called the heart. And then you got these big pipes leading into and out of it called great vessels. Okay, put a needle in there. Let's see what happens, right? So you have a high-risk problem at a very inaccessible site. It's hard to get to. So what do you wind up having to do? You wind up having to have these very highly specialized types of doctors, whether it's a surgeon, first of all, a radiologist, and it's not just any old radiologist. Actually, more and more we're asking for thoracic radiologists because, you know, other radiologists often make mistakes. So it needs to be somebody who's skilled because he's done a lot of this over many years, so he knows what's right and what doesn't quite look right. So you just imagine how it goes. A doctor says, I want to get an x-ray. Who's that doctor likely to be? It's going to be a primary care doctor, it's going to be an ER doc, it's going to be a hospitalist, okay? There are three different types of doctors, but they have one thing in common. You know what that one thing is? They don't have any of the skill sets required to figure out if this is a lung cancer and what to do about it. So what are they going to do? They have to find somebody to pass you off to, right? Okay. Who am I going to pass this guy off to? Well, you know, my neighbor happens to be an oncologist, so I'm going to send this person who has lung cancer to him. Well, yeah, I'm an oncologist. I don't know how to get a biopsy. You know, you don't want me doing a biopsy on you. I'll hurt you. So you send that patient to me. What am I going to do? I'm going to turn right around and say, oh, Joe, God. Okay, send him to the radiologist and please figure out what kind of biopsy does this guy need. So the radiologist takes a look, you know, it gives it one shot, you know, doesn't get it. And then it takes a while for that information to get back to me that, well, he tried, he didn't get it. You look up, 3 weeks have passed. And I'm like, okay, now who? Well, should I send you to the pulmonologist or surgeon? Tell you what, let me just send you to both, and you just figure out, let's figure. You look up, and, you know, another amount of time has gone by. So we said, look, okay, this is crazy. This drive-by serial, you know, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 just doesn't work, you know. Meanwhile, you've just told somebody they have a time bomb about to blow up in their chest. Hurry up, wait. So we said, no, that doesn't work. What we have to do is bring all these different types of doctors together. Both the ones who know how to do the different types of biopsies. I don't know what type of biopsy you need. Don't trust me to know it. Just let's get everybody who knows how to do it. Let them duke it out among themselves. Whose tool is the right one for this individual here before us right now? And once we do that, we also know if it's a cancer, these are the steps that we're going to take. Who's going to do it? How are they going to do it? Where are they going to do it? So basically, you take this accordion that can stretch out like this, and you squeeze it down to its narrowest, so you can get this time shrunken down as much as possible, get what you need done, and through the same means, get the right thing that you needed. Not 3 months later when somebody finally figures it out, but 3 days later, because we all argued among ourselves, called ourselves names, got angry because somebody was trying to not let me do what I'm paid to do, and finally came to agreement that, okay, you sit down for now. This is the guy who needs to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like a Sunday dinner,
yeah.
a family Sunday dinner. Gina talked a little bit earlier about her cancer spreading to her brain and having CyberKnife, and that is yet another tool that I think is so important in having this multidisciplinary team together, because quite often when you don't, folks who might qualify for this sort of targeted radiation therapy wind up getting whole brain radiation. And having the specialist in the room, having these conversations and talking it out, I think is oh so important. Talk a little bit about what role palliative or supportive care plays in this. I think most patients hear the word palliative care and they think that that's an automatic death sentence and they don't even want to have the discussion. But why is it so important that that type of supportive care and symptom management happen really from day one?
Yeah. So you asked a great question, Danielle, and I'm going to answer it along with this one. You said, who are the different people? I mentioned a few, okay? There are the radiologists, the pulmonologists, the medical oncologist, the surgeon, okay? And, you know, the radiologists are several different types. There are nuclear radiologists, there are thoracic radiologists, there are interventional radiologists who also help get tissue. You have all these people who are all designed to either help make a diagnosis and help do active treatment. But we also know that lung cancer is not only a cancer that kills, but it's a cancer that, while it's taking its time killing, makes life truly miserable. You know, dying of lung cancer is a choking, coughing, can't breathe, drowning in your own blood kind of a death. Don't wish it on anybody, okay? So lots of symptoms: weight loss, pain, if the cancer gets to a certain part of the body, shortness of breath, tremendous anxiety, okay? So there's another member of the multidisciplinary team whose role is often discounted: the palliative care specialist. The person who has the great knowledge and wisdom to be able to lift that burden of symptoms away from an individual, no matter what else is going on with the cancer, whether we're treating, trying to cure it, or waiting for life to end. So one of the big mistakes that people make is interchange the word palliative care with end of life or hospice care. Okay, that's a common error. Doctors make that mistake all the time. Oncologists make that mistake all the time. I can't tell you how many times my colleagues have said, how dare you get a palliative care consult on my patient? I'm still treating him with chemotherapy. Like, no, these are not mutually exclusive. And the thing that we have found out, the really exciting thing from the last 5, 6 years now, I think time moves so fast sometimes you think it just happened yesterday. But there was a very powerful study that was done out of Boston that looked at patients with advanced lung cancer and divided similar patients, one group to get all the care that you get at the wonderful Harvard Medical School hospitals, okay? And then took a matched group of the same patients from the same institution. And in addition to you get that wonderful care, you also get the benefit of interacting with palliative care specialists early on in the process. And much to everybody's surprise, two things happened. The patients who received palliative care received less chemotherapy, less intensive treatment. That's what every oncologist always suspected would happen. That's why we don't want you taking care of our patient. But the second thing that happened was more of those patients survived and survived longer. So you get less intensive treatment, but you actually live longer. And when you gave the report about how life was all through the time that you were going through the study, those who received palliative care said life was way better than those who did not. So clearly, our palliative care colleagues have a major role to play for us and for our patients.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's so important, and Gina touched on another thing that kind of falls into this same space and conversation, which is your initial conversation with Dr. O, and he spent 2 hours with you explaining all of this and having what is now sort of the buzz sort of term for it is shared decision making, and really talking to patients about what their goals of care are and what that might look like, right? And it's so important as also part of what good looks like to be talking a little bit about that. And I know some of you might know this and some of you might not. So my sort of step into lung cancer was when my mom was diagnosed in 2003. And my mom happens to be Bonnie of the foundation. So ever since 2003, I dug my heels in, and I haven't looked back. And really, surrounding myself with everything lung cancer and figuring out what this looks like and how we can use this knowledge and what we do at the foundation to help other people. And all the things that we're talking about today were not things that were available in 2003. She was given 0 options from several different doctors, and we put together our own multi-D team from several different places, academic and community, and she's still here today. So I think it's so important that you guys are hearing what the good looks like and all of these different sort of spokes on the wheel that kind of create that and get that wheel in motion. So how does a COE become a COE? How do they get a designation from, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and we'll probably.
Yeah, sure. So we are in contact with a number of different hospitals and physicians, and we meet physicians through many sources, through referrals from our current physicians, through industry referrals. And essentially we find what might be a COE champion. And a lot of people ask me when I look across our 20+ COEs, they're like, oh, well, what profile is your COE champion? What title do they have? And to be honest, they have all different titles, and it's really someone who is passionate and dedicated and understands the value of that multidisciplinary team effort. And in many cases, we have amazing nurse navigators like Kim Parham and Christy, who are, Kim was a nurse navigator at one of our sites, and Christy's one now. We have, medical oncologists. In many cases, we have interventional pulmonologists, who are the ones who do the navigational bronchoscopies that Gina spoke about. And so oftentimes the COE champion, or the person really carrying the flag, can take on many different roles or titles. But what is sort of the unifying message is that they really all understand the value of coordinated care, and they've seen the value to patients of coordinated care. And that's really the crux of what we need to start the conversation around, is this hospital and this team really ready to become a COE? What we've done over the past couple of years is really develop what we call the COE qualifying criteria worksheet, which is a list of, what does good look like? What are the minimums to have? What are the nice to have? And to really start that conversation with these multidisciplinary teams to understand where they are and what are their aspirations for their lung or thoracic oncology program. So we go through, discussions and assessments of where they are. And we start to really identify what are the pieces they have in place today and where do they hope to get to. So it is a process. Some people can check the boxes right off the bat, and we can designate them as a center of excellence. I'm actually on the road in the next couple of days to add on one of our newest COEs at Norton in Louisville, Kentucky. And they could just walk through the list and like, yep, we're doing all of these. And then some others, they're saying, what, we don't quite yet have the nurse navigator in process, or we just instituted our, low-dose CT scanning program, a year ago, so we don't really have a lot of experience with it. So we just, we keep that dialogue open. We understand where they are and how we can be helpful at that point in time.
And how do we sort of track what's happening at that hospital to ensure that what they're saying is happening is happening?
Sure. So initially, we go through that process of going through our worksheet or our checklist to understand what are the pieces that they have in place. One of the projects that I've instituted, which Dr. O has been very involved with, is something that we call our Coa Impact Study. And basically what it is, it's an annual review by which we can collect data out of each of our COEs that really cover the entire lung cancer care continuum. So what we try to aim for is, within this survey tool, is to, one, understand what patient population they're providing service to. So we ask a lot of questions about patient demographics, whether that's the age range or the stage at which they were found, or ethnicity, insurance mix, how far they have to travel. So we can get an understanding of, what does that patient population look like? We have hospitals all over the country, so we have some in more urban settings versus rural settings versus Southern California versus like right outside of New York City. So we have a pretty wide variety of locations, and so we ask questions that tell us a little bit about that patient population. We also then ask questions that really cover the entire lung cancer care continuum, from that early, screening and lung nodule phase through early stage diagnosis and treatment, all the way through late stage diagnosis and treatment. We also ask about, goals of care discussions, palliative care discussions. So we ask a lot of information about, how is care delivered, and we try to capture both what I call quantitative information as well as qualitative information. So not just how much or how often, but the why behind it.
So why, and Dr. I'm going to ask you this question. Is there anything unique about this sort of data set, or why is gathering this information important?
Yeah, so quality improvement is impossible without data. If you ask everybody how they're doing, everybody will probably believe that they're doing great. But we know that it's always a spectrum, and we know that that spectrum is broad, but we know that the height of the spectrum is not nearly as high as it needs to be. We could all improve. I don't care whether you're MD Anderson, Dana-Farber, or Baptist, or somewhere in Muleshoe, Muscle Shoals, Alabama, or anywhere else. We all can improve. If you just take a condition with an aggregate, all comers mashed together, 5-year survival of 18%, we have 82% room to improve until we get to 100%. So we can all improve. We could all use quality improvement. But quality improvement is impossible if you don't have data. You have to measure, and measure again, okay? This is where we were to begin with. How do we know? Because we gathered all this critical information, we put it together, we counted it, added it, multiplied it, divided it, subtracted it, and we came up with a number. And the number is for real because we've kicked it around, looked at it upside down, sideways, and we think it links towards the direction we want to go. So we want this number to go from where it is now to keep rising or falling, depending on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So what number, for example, would we like to see? We would like to see the aggregate 5-year survival of lung cancer go from 18% to 100%. You say, well, gee, is that possible? Well, breast cancer is at over 90% now. It's possible. We just haven't done the work it takes to do it. So you have to measure. And you can't just go around measuring anything that moves, of course. You have to figure out the things to measure that are important. And sometimes you start out thinking this is the one, and then as you go on, you find, well, maybe not. There's a better thing to measure. So that's what Leah and her team are doing right now, trying to figure out, okay, which of these many different things we can measure would be most relevant. And we've done it twice now. We've looked. Now we're talking about building a foundation that we can now start comparing year to year. Leah, you might want to tell us more about that.
So basically, with this COE Impact Study, it's an annual tool that we can launch into our COE program by which we can collect longitudinal data. So that's year-over-year data. So at any given point when when a COE enters the program, we're always asking about the prior calendar year's data, so that this way we can start to track trends. And I was just actually having this conversation with your colleague Nick this afternoon. You can collect as much data as you want, but unless you curate the data to tell a story and let it tell its story, you can't. It really doesn't have any value. So there's the ability and the value of collecting data in the first place, but then there's also how do you curate that data so that it can tell the story it needs to tell. And that's really what the COE Impact Study is designed to do, is to help us tell the story, and then it allows us to then go out there and communicate what we're starting to see and where the opportunities for improvement or where the opportunities to plug quality gaps are. And as Dr. O said, there's always room for improvement, and there's no shame in wanting to get better and wanting to get to 100% and wanting to get to, stage shifting and moving, more patients to that early stage. And so the COE Impact Study really provides and shines a light and brings into sharp focus what's going on well and where are the areas of improvement. And then hopefully what we're planning on for this year is to hold a COE summit by which we can bring people from all of our COE programs together and start to really dig into all of that data and really try to operationalize what those improvement areas might be.
So one of the things that I know we were all really excited about, and Dr. O played a big role in this as well, is two years in a row, there's several conferences every year all over the world. But the World Lung Cancer Conference is an international conference that brings in thousands and thousands of people who specialize in lung cancer in one way or another. And folks that are doing studies and this type of research are allowed to submit what they call abstracts and cross their fingers that they become accepted. And 2 years in a row, this was not only accepted for what they call a poster, where you can kind of stand by, something and explain to people, but it was accepted for oral abstract, which Dr. O presented, which is a pretty big deal in that space. So it's a little self-plug for ALCF and the COE community and network, because I think that what we're doing is making a difference. So. How do you guys see this program evolving and growing? If pie in the sky hope, what do we hope to accomplish by doing this, and how are we going to do it?
Yes. So my vision for lung cancer care is that every single patient, regardless of where they are or what program they enter, has access to all of the best-in-class diagnostics, treatments in a timely fashion. And I think, we're far from it, but I think, the COE program can help us get there. And certainly with, our data collection tool, hopefully we can start to demonstrate to, the lung cancer community, to the physician community, to, the groups that set guidelines that, this model of care actually does, result in better outcomes. And that would ultimately be the goal, is to, again, start to be able to standardize and scale this model of care as broadly as possible. And to Dr. O's point earlier, one of the things that I think about is, that delta between the level of care that's available today and the level of access that people have. And there's tremendous opportunity for people to benefit from the care that exists today that they're not quite getting to yet. And I think it's just as much about an access question as it is about, advances in medical or clinical science.
So what are some of those barriers that might prevent a hospital from, anywhere, from being able to develop a comprehensive lung program like this? Either of you?
So I have a somewhat subversive point of view about that. I think that the real barrier to access to high quality care is that patients are not empowered enough to make things difficult enough to make people have to give them what they need. So you asked the question earlier, how, what do we hope pie in the sky for the program to be able to achieve? I think if somehow we got to a situation where Gina or anybody coming well after Gina has had to come in can walk into any place with this problem, and whether the doctor, hospital, whoever likes it or not, they ask the questions that force them to give them the care that they ought to have. You see, there is a power dynamic, whether we realize it or not. It's a very unfair power dynamic. What you have is people like myself walking around in a white coat looking important, okay? But the reality is that we would have no importance whatsoever, but for the fact that there are people who need our service. So you ask the question, what do we do in healthcare? What do? We don't manufacture anything in healthcare. We provide a service, okay? And too often we forget that. So when we say, what are the barriers to care? I think the biggest barrier to care in a democracy is that we do not understand enough to be able to challenge for the care we need. And one of the things that I'm really excited about the Dario Center of Excellence program is the potential opportunity to create that groundswell of knowledge that allows people to be empowered to go in and say, wait a minute, no, I want a second opinion, okay? And not feel as if You know, the doctor might get angry if I do that. Who cares if the doctor gets angry? Yeah, it's not his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, because that's another thing we hear all the time as well. You know, I'm fine where I am, and, you know, they treated my grandfather, and, you know, that worked out well, or maybe it didn't, or patients always, not always, but quite often feel bad or guilty about asking for a second opinion, and it's so, so, so important. In fact, we tell patients all the time, if your physician gets upset about discussing a second opinion, that's not someplace you want to be anyway, right? Because one of you said it, we've all still got things to learn. The day we don't have things to continue to learn is a problem. Do you have? Go ahead, sorry. I was getting time.
Going to make an analogy. Years ago, I had this like bizarre skin rash, and I went to a number of dermatologists, and no one could solve it. And I kind of just gave up, and I was like, all right, I'll just kind of let it be. And my husband says, would you ever let your car mechanic half fix your vehicle? That would be totally unacceptable. So why would you ever let a doctor half fix you? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, well, that makes sense. Like, you know, like any other service provider, you would never let them half fix you, or you would never question if they gave you, you know.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I'm being aware of the time and what's going on. I want to see if anybody has any questions first, or anything they want to ask. Yeah. Sorry. No, don't be sorry. There's a couple of you, so this is great. Go ahead.
This is a question for Dr. O. You talked about the screening process for lung cancer. What's the criteria for someone to have the screening?
Yeah. So we base the hardest criteria on the entry criteria for the National Lung Screening Trial, okay? That trial required patients eligible to participate to be 55 and older, and to have smoked the equivalent of 30-pack year history, and to either be active, or if they had quit, to have quit inside of 15 years. So why would you do that? We know that people who don't smoke, get lung cancer, haven't ever smoked, can get lung cancer. You know, as Gina has reminded me several times, we know that if you have lungs, you can get lung cancer. We know that people who smoked only in high school, you know, or college can get lung cancer. We also know people who quit smoking 30 years ago can get lung cancer. But that was a clinical trial that was trying to prove a concept, okay? And to be able to prove it, they had to enrich their population for the highest risk patients. And great, the trial was successful. So now here we are in the world in which the trial has been successful, scratching our heads and trying to say, okay, now how do we pay for this? So the easiest place to begin is to say, okay, anybody who meets the carbon copy criteria is eligible. So that's what Medicare, you know, pay for. They actually extended it, actually. So the trial did 3 annual scans. You had a baseline, 1 year later, 1 year later. What Medicare approved was you can continue going until you're, I think there's an age, I think, was it 75 or somewhere beyond that? So that's kind of where it is now. There are lots of other people saying, wait, that was just a clinical trial, but now that we're in real life, we have to find a way to open it up, because there are lots of people who get lung cancer who would not have qualified for a screening test. The challenge there, of course, is that, you know, I told you, even these super high-risk people, almost 40% of them have an abnormal screening test, meaning it's saying, cancer, 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 but only 4% of those people actually have lung cancer. So even the highest risk people, it's the small minority who have it. So if you now open it up to much lower risk people, the fear is you're just going to be hurting a lot of people. We've got a lot of work to do ahead of ourselves, decades from now, to try to figure it out. People are coming up with risk calculators. The NCCN, the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, has come up with a wider set of criteria that includes your family history. So if relatives have had lung cancer, we know that lung cancer runs in families also, okay? So if you have a family history, they put you at a slightly higher risk and can allow you to have a few weaker other criteria. But ultimately, it comes down to the person who's going to pay for it. So if you were willing to go out of pocket and say, okay, here's my 2 cents, I want my screening low-dose CT now, chances are you'll be able to get it. If your insurance company is willing to say, well, yeah, we think lung cancer is a problem, we think those criteria are clinical trial criteria, but we know more people, it's only the minority of people who will get lung cancer who would actually qualify for low-dose CT screening, so we want to do something to open it up, you will probably be able to get it. So it's work in evolution.
Yeah, it's definitely not ideal and not where it needs to be, but it's a start, and we needed a start.
It's a wonderful start.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My brother and I were working with Dr. O. We were fortunate to work on the team for the establishing the patient-centered care clinic here. And a point of clarification for us, would you say that patient-centered care and CE, Center of Excellence, are synonymous terms?
Yes, and that's really part of this whole multidisciplinary team focus, is that it is centered on the patients. And again, all of the components to that, coordinated care, the physicians are speaking to one another, they're making like very real-time decisions, everyone has a seat at the table. And it's very, very much so patient care focused, in the sense that, I've sat in on many of these multidisciplinary teams and these tumor boards where they've reviewed it, and they have patients literally in the various exam rooms where they're going through collectively all of the patient's information, making decisions, consulting back with the patient, coming back in, working with the nurses teams to really understand, what information is available, working on scheduling. And you literally see the time from diagnosis to treatment to, getting them in for, follow-up appointments, just shrinking. And it really, that essentially is at the highest level, very patient-centric care. They're there to, minimize wait times, to make it efficient, to provide them with as much information, with as many voices, in that decision as possible.
So the Center of Excellence is like an Addario terminology, same for multidisciplinary clinic.
So
it's the same
the Center
thing.
of Excellence actually has more than that. Okay. They have several in fact, when we presented the first paper Danielle referred to in Vienna 2 years ago, we tried to sort of categorize the criteria into 6, I think. Mm-hmm. So it was, you had to have a multidisciplinary team. So you had to have all these specialists, including the nurses, the navigators, the schedulers, who are also vital members of the team, by the way, and the patients and their caregivers, also vital members of the team. You had to have them interacting in some constructive way. So you had to have that. You had to have the use of modern molecular diagnostics and therapeutics. You had to provide access to that, wide open access to that, to patients who needed it, okay? You had to have an early diagnosis and management program, so the standard low-dose CT, but we also added not only that, but you also had to have a mechanism to be able to track all these other hundreds of thousands of CAT scans that you do for many different reasons, some of which show a spot, so you had to have a way to hoover them in and keep track of that.
Remembering the checklist that we did when you were working on that.
Exactly. So all these components, I think, are
and access to clinical trials. And
okay.
Yeah.
So with all that and the clarification, we're just in the same think area. Sitting here listening to this, the first time I've participated in the living room, I would say that the thing that we need to do, and I don't know what the answer is, but how do we get the country involved in this process? What is the mechanism to get this information out to the population? Because I don't think a lot of people in the country whose families are dealing with lung cancer know anything about this.
We're trying.
But you're trying, Addario, but there's got to be, with everything that's going on with the healthcare program in this country, you know,
there are so a number of the things that we're working on, and we spoke about it, and Danielle mentioned it. We were able to publish some of our data at ISLAC World Lung, which again gives us sort of a world stage of oncology or lung cancer specialists, where we can start to demonstrate the power of this model of care and why it's important. We also, you know, as part of the COE program, all of the ALCF resources that patients rely on, the living rooms, the handbooks, all of our events, you know, we channel that through to our, you know, patient communities within our COEs as well. So, you know, hoping to create that army of survivors out there and people who can speak positively around, you know, what does good care look like, and really become.
Because we went through a stack of mail because I've been traveling. I'm smiling because I could have brought with me 4 solicitations for donations for cancer from different organizations, and I would have sent a check to all of them.
You could send
because
a check
of my brother, right? But
to us.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so
I'm looking for a centralized.
I want to add on to a couple of things that Leah said and Dr. O said earlier about the data and the research. And data is king. So one of the large purposes of the impact study that Leah developed with Dr. O and others is that's why it's so important that we have it and that it's the right information, right? But number 2 is running these studies cost money. I mean, at the end of the day, they cost money. We can't get them done for free. And the research dollars in lung cancer in particular are very, very low when compared to some other cancers. So it's a challenge. And it's why we're out there, you know, all the time, not just, you know, doing living rooms and providing some of these more patient-centered programs such as the COE, but we have a whole events team out, you know, trying to get into the communities and help raise money and make them aware of everything that we provide as well. But then also we work very closely with the Lung Cancer Alliance, which their primary focus is on legislation and policy. And that's really kind of where it begins when you're talking about federal funding and the multi-millions and millions and millions of dollars that are really needed to go back into the lung cancer space in order to allow these changes to happen more quickly than they are.
But we had someone here, I believe it was one of the meetings for the American Cancer Association, who told us that they had money. We have money for cancer research.
They do have money for cancer research, and I think one of the things I highly encourage people to do before they donate to any organization is dig deep and look where their money is going. The American Cancer Society does have money for cancer research. The question is, how much do they have for lung? And that's what you need to ask.
Right, and exactly.
Yeah.
We're on the subject of lung cancer.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We all know all the 5K and 10K runs there are for breast cancer and all the celebrities and blah, blah, Delta Airlines, President Pink.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, lung cancer has not traditionally been a very sympathetic cancer. There's a lot of blame and a lot of nihilism about lung cancer, quite frankly. So when people see someone like Gina, they probably make a double take because that's not the picture they have in their head of what a lung cancer patient ought to look like. So that's part of our challenge, yeah. We have not done a good job over the years of making the case to support lung cancer as a survivable problem.
I think the stigma plays a huge role. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways we can do that. There definitely needs to be a general awareness. Anyone can get lung cancer. You know, there are several groups out there who have done amazing work decades ago in sort of anti-tobacco, anti-smoking campaigns. But what happened is smoking rates dropped, which was great, but it also caused the people who didn't smoke to be sort of, or who still did smoke, become stigmatized and kind of hide in the shadows. And I think that's been one piece of the larger problem. Yeah, yeah. I think we have another question, yeah.
Thank you. Actually, this is for Dr. O. It's 2 questions. One, how soon should you request your second biopsy? I have a family member that was diagnosed a year ago, and they've only had 1 biopsy. And the second question I have is there a correlation between lung cancer and heart disease? Because recently this person just had a heart attack. So those are my two questions.
Yeah. So I'll take the second question first because it's easier. Absolutely. The common link is smoking for both. Smoking is is that right? That's interesting. So there's also secondhand smoke, of course, and there's also beyond that, both diseases are illnesses of aging. So as we get older, we accumulate heart damage. We also accumulate genetic damage that can lead to cancers. So if you look at lung cancer in America, half the patients are 72 years and above. Half the patients are younger than 72, but most of those who are younger than 72 are also in the Medicare age, 65 and above. So lung cancer is a disease that you get, Gina notwithstanding, again, she lives as a testament to everything the opposite of our stereotypes for lung cancer. But it is that time also is a risk factor. And then the first question you asked was, when should we get the second biopsy? The somewhat facetious answer is, of course, we hope never, meaning everything is going swimmingly and we don't need a biopsy. But the time when we need a second biopsy is when something has gone wrong. So if we're doing well and everything seems great, no, you don't need anybody poking at you with a sharp object. But if you have something changing, the cancer is beginning to grow somewhere, or something new has popped up that we are not sure what it is. So the key thing here is for the doctor not to just roll on naturally into his next thing, okay, which was the habit that we all had when we lived in a world of nothing, okay? We didn't have alternatives, so it was okay to just grab whatever it was and sort of give it, and you billed for it. The patient went home, got sick, and nothing good happened to them, but you tried. We've left that world now, okay? So we can't let the doctors stay in that world, okay? They have to practice medicine now. They have to play chess, okay? You have to think, okay, what else could this be? Which of these many different possible things can this be? And how do you know, doctor, which one it is? Well, you're gonna need that biopsy. So when something goes wrong again.
Any other questions? I'm trying to be mindful of time. I know we're going over a little bit. Okay, so then with that, I would like to say thank you to all of you in the room, all of you online, and of course our amazing panel, Gina, Leah, and Dr. O, for coming in and talking about this oh so important topic and why we felt it was important for all of you to know what good looks like. And ensure that you are advocating for yourself and becoming empowered enough so that you can go out and demand, to Dr. O's point, this type of care. And in your community setting, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get it there. So thank you all so much. I'm going to jump into a couple of housekeeping things, which I also typically do at the end of every living room for those who may watch regularly. Our next living room is April 17th, so we will effectively have had 3 living rooms in about a 2.5-week period, which is why the bags under my eyes are so big. We've got Dr. Jack West coming in from Swedish in Seattle to talk about combination immunotherapy. So some of the things that are happening in the trial space and what that looks like and what that means to lung cancer patients. Our next few 5Ks, I'm very happy to say that we are having one here in Memphis, Tennessee on Saturday, April 21st at Shelby Farms Park. Anna's here, if Anna could raise her hand. For anyone who might be interested in signing up tonight, if you haven't already, anyone signing in online, you can reach out to the foundation and we can put you in touch with the right person. But it is our first event in Memphis, and we're so excited about it. Gina's excited about it. And it's really, an opportunity, obviously, not only to raise money, but to really kind of help to create this community here in Memphis around lung cancer and getting people involved, patients, caregivers alike. So, sorry? And you can bring your dog to this one. So Anna can give you any information you need about that. May 6th, for anybody who might be watching, and or if anybody in the room knows somebody in Columbus, Ohio, we're having a 5K there. May 19th in Dallas. And then also one of the things I wanted to talk about in Ohio, because like I said, we did do a living room there last week, and I know some people were going to be signing in that were also signed in last week from Columbus. The Breath of Hope Foundation is having their celebration gala on April 21st in Columbus, so at L Brands, and I'm not really sure what that is, but anybody who is interested in attending that community event that night, please reach out to us and we can put you in touch with the right people there as well. And that's it, other than thanking all of our supporters. So we absolutely, speaking of funding and whatnot, we could not get this done without the support of the people who are helping us pay for all of this craziness. So a huge thank you to Bristol Myers Squibb, Lilly, Novartis, Genentech, Merck, Astellas, Celgene, AstraZeneca, Medtronic, and Takeda for their support in enabling us to get this to you guys. Thank you to the local Memphis film crew for coming out and doing a great job setting up, in spite of the fact that we came in and mixed it up a little bit after you'd already done such a great job. So thank you, everybody. There is dessert and coffee for anybody who's interested, everybody online. Thank you for signing in, and we will see you on the 17th.